Well, good morning. I'm Ken Biberaj, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. We are back in person in Ivy City at Compass Coffee's Roastery, and we're thrilled to have a live audience as well as folks watching from home. We want to give a big thanks to Michael Haft and the entire Compass family for hosting us. They are always amazing partners. And if you visit your local Compass Coffee Roastery, the Cherry Blossom Blend is out. Thank you, Michael. In the news today, Russian warplanes hit an American drone over the Black Sea, and President Biden announced an executive order to bolster gun control safety measures. Today's topic is EV acceleration, and we're joined by the Executive Director of the Zero Emissions Transportation Association, Albert Gore III. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Well, here, we always do a little toast. You haven't had enough coffee this morning with the 5-month-old, right?
Oh, I've had more than enough.
Okay. I think I have to. So. Well, look, it's great to see you. It's topic du jour, but why don't we kind of level set? Explain to us, what is ZETA, how long has it been around, and what's your primary focus?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thanks to everybody who came out on a very cold, windy day. Hopefully the coffee is hot. So ZETA is the first industry-backed coalition of its kind. It's been around almost 3 years. And we've got about 60 companies now in the coalition spanning the full EV supply chain. So it came into being in 2020 and really with a goal of advocating for full EV adoption. And it's the only industry-backed coalition out there that really is united around that goal. And there are many, many different reasons for advocating for that goal, from climate to national security, supply chain resiliency, air quality, and health. But in general, it's a really broad coalition spanning mining companies, electric utilities, EV manufacturers, battery manufacturers, and charging network developers and operators. And some other charging equipment manufacturers and a few others as well. So all united around a shared goal of moving as quickly as possible to zero emission transportation.
And you're not new to the sector, right? You spent years working at Tesla. Talk a little bit about your personal background, what got you into the space, and has kind of led you to ZETA today.
Yeah, my background is I spent nearly 7 years at Tesla. The first 18 months or so were at Solar City. So I actually did sort of a career change out of grad school into renewable energy. I was really inspired by the rapid pace of adoption of rooftop solar at the time when I started really studying it around 2013, and joined Solar City, which at the time was the largest rooftop solar company in the country. And sort of by luck and acquisition, ended up at Tesla at the start of 2017, which was at the time Tesla had 2 models out, the Model S and the Model X, which were by today's standards fairly low volume, sort of higher price, and was able to begin working on EV policy right at the beginning of the production ramp for the Model 3. So was there for the announcement of the Model 3, which was a mass market tagged to the sort of $35,000 price point, which is now almost a full $15,000 below the average transaction price of a vehicle in the United States. It's amazing how much that market's been affected over the last few years. But 2017 was an incredible year at Tesla, where the Model 3 really expanded, I think, the market for electric vehicles beyond what already existed. So a really fun time to come into the industry. I worked there through the first half of 2022. I left Tesla last June in order to take some time off, prepare for the arrival of our 3rd child. Congrats. So we had a baby in October, and was really, really fortunate to come into contact with the folks at ZETA and join this team at an amazing time for working on EV policy.
And let's drill down about this time, right? Like this moment today seems to be an especially opportune one. We had Jigger Shaw, who runs a loan program office, on our talk in the fall, and it was right after passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, and that coupled with the CHIPS Act, infrastructure bill. This seems to be a unique moment in time. I mean, tell everybody, why is this special, for EV and the supply chain that contributes to it?
Well, it really has been an amazing 2 years for policymaking around industrial policy in general, manufacturing policy in the United States. But the way that touches the automotive sector is it has really revitalized, I think, or re-energized investment in new manufacturing capacity, whether it's batteries, cars themselves, also charging equipment. And that's really a result of two major pieces of legislation: the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was passed 2 years ago. And that we're actually a number of folks here today were with me and others in the room yesterday at DOT, where they were announcing the community grants program, which was a part of that bill. But in total, that bill puts $7.5 billion into the first piece of the Biden administration's goal of 500,000 EV chargers deployed. So that program from the bipartisan infrastructure law is a part of that. The Inflation Reduction Act last year is another major part of it. It creates an additional incentive program around EV chargers, targeting a different piece of the market than the infrastructure law did. But it also reforms the clean vehicle tax credit, which is consumer facing. It does other things, like it creates a battery production tax credit, which is at a really meaningful level in terms of how much it's going to offset in terms of the price per kilowatt hour of new batteries that are going into EVs. And that is driving a lot of investment in battery production in the United States, on top of a lot of existing investment that was coming here. So it's been an amazing time for climate policy. First of all, I mean, I think it was primarily an industrial policy bill with a focus on job creation, economic development, trade and national security and supply chain resiliency for sure. But in addition to all of that was the strongest piece of climate legislation ever passed by nearly every analysis. And so a lot of that, relies on the implementation of it and the partnership with the private sector in creating new jobs, new production facilities here. But it is a really, really successful piece of legislation coming on the heels of a very successful bipartisan piece of legislation 2 years ago.
So the scope of beneficiaries, I always talk with my friends, and we have some folks here from Lot 16 about, it's not just the big companies that are going to benefit, right? Like further down the supply chain, battery manufacturers and so on. Part of this is educational, right? Like engaging with the private sector so companies know that there are incentives, right? I mean, how much of a role do you think you're going to play with ZETA to kind of get out there and be an evangelist to smaller companies who may not even realize that they could be a part of this supply chain, benefit from federal regs, and help accelerate further adoption?
Yeah, well, that's a big part of it.
Are you just going to go have coffee all over America? I mean,
Yeah, I'm always open for coffee, and I desperately need coffee. So if anybody wants to invite me for coffee. But yeah, it is a huge part of it. I mean, one of the great things about our coalition is many of the companies that are in ZETA have been created over the last decade or two. And there are also, several 100-year-old companies when you talk about the utility sector and some of the larger, more established manufacturing companies that have moved into the space. But from everything from auto manufacturing to charging networks, these have been really huge entrepreneurial opportunities for people over the last decade or so, who were sort of ahead of the wave of consumer adoption and saw an opportunity and invested in it. So, you know, public policy's played an enormous role in encouraging this, but the private sector has also done an enormous amount of investment and its own,
Sure.
evangelism around the benefits of electric transportation. There are many reasons to consider an electric vehicle that go beyond climate and air quality. Performance and safety, ease of use, total cost of ownership. These are all really important considerations for people when they're considering buying a car, which for most people is maybe the second largest purchase they'll ever make, or that they may make in any given time period. So yeah, a big part of what we do as a group is continue that work of communicating this belief in the benefit of electric or zero emission transportation, and encourage more people to consider adopting these products, also to consider working in this industry, consider investing in this industry, because it's a really compelling time to do that.
And what are some of the mental roadblocks you think consumers have? I mean, is it about range? Is it about cold weather and batteries not working? Like, what are the kind of myths or challenges you kind of see in the market?
Yeah, it's all of that. I think the barriers, the psychological barriers to adoption have been fairly sort of well known and discussed for a long time. It's price first and foremost. There is still on average a delta between the average EV and the average gas car, although that's very quickly closing. Also, think back a decade or more ago, there was a perception around performance, and many people thought of EVs as kind of glorified golf carts. There was a perception that you were losing something in terms of speed or performance relative to the sort of muscle cars of years past. I think that has really been sort of demolished over the last decade, in part because companies like Tesla and others have come out with really high performance models that are some of the fastest production cars on the market, but also safety has been proven to really be kind of enhanced by the way that most EVs are made. Most EVs use the battery pack as the chassis, and increasingly as a structural element in the vehicle that really enhances things like crash safety. So those are two, and then charging availability and range anxiety is a term that I think has been really familiar to folks in this industry for the last 7-8 years. And that's a big part of what recent policy, recent industry developments is going after. It's really important that people have chargers that they will use on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And it's also important that people know chargers are out there, even if they're not necessarily going to use them. It can be, if they may not end up using them as much as they think they will, because a lot of charging ends up taking place at home or at work or various other places. Knowing that charging is widely available is incredibly important when someone's considering adopting an EV.
So real quick on just the stats. So since President Biden came into office, I think EV sales have tripled. Charging is up 40%. The goal of, I think currently we have 3 million EVs out there and 130,000 public charging, but they're looking to get a 50% EV purchases by 2030. Are you happy with those goals? Are we on track? Do you think we should be doing more? Like, well, as an advocacy organization?
Of course, we think we should be doing more. I want to take a step back and just sort of appreciate how amazing that is.
Because it feels like it was already going like this, but now it kind of seems like it's even.
Yes, especially going back to.
And after this coffee talk, I'm pretty sure it's just gonna.
I mean, we're gonna get to
pinpoint this date when.
The coffee with Ken bump is real. I know it's been studied. So it's just amazing going back even just to 2017 and looking now at what the stats you just cited is a testament to not just the success of public policy, the success of the private sector in moving so quickly and effectively in this direction, but also I think the degree to which customers are having a good experience with these vehicles across the board, regardless of brand, regardless of where they live, et cetera. It is a good customer experience, a good driving experience, ownership experience when it comes to electric vehicles. So I think it is absolutely possible to exceed what the 50% by 2030 target that you just cited. That's actually the goal that ZETA's united around, is accelerating that timeline and removing the current barriers. Now that many of the previous barriers to adoption have sort of started to come down, started to be reduced in their severity, like what are the next frontier of barriers to adoption? And there are some that relate to how the IRA and the IIJ will be successful policies. So there are things like mineral content requirements, domestic content requirements with regard to critical minerals and battery components. Vehicles need to be assembled in North America as well. So a big challenge and opportunity as it relates to the IRA and succeeding on those policies is reshoring the supply chain for electric vehicles, from everything from minerals to battery components and the vehicles themselves. Sometimes it's creating a new supply chain where one doesn't currently exist. Sometimes it's bolstering an existing supply chain, and that
microchips.
Microchips is a similar issue. There's a lot of overlap with renewable energy as well. Some of the same minerals are used in EVs and renewable energy products. Some of the same permitting processes that sometimes create longer timelines for new mineral development are also affecting things like transmission for electricity and renewable energy. So there's a lot of overlapping issues that policymakers are focused on right now. It's going to have to emerge out of a bipartisan process. And there's a huge opportunity. You've got folks in the House putting forward packages. You've got John Podesta speaking positively about a permitting reform in a way that acknowledges, I think, the degree to which the IRA hinges on some sort of improved process with regard to bringing new projects online, at the very least, as quickly as peer countries like Canada and Australia are able to do. So, huge opportunity for more policymaking that has economy-wide impact.
So speaking of policymaking, I mean, a lot of the focus to date seems to be federal focused, but a lot happens in the states. You personally have a lot of experience dealing with states when you were at Tesla. News out of Maryland yesterday, Governor Wes Moore announcing that he wants 100% of new vehicle sales to be EV by 2035 in Maryland. How important is it to engage state and local municipal leaders to get them on board as well?
It's hugely important. State policy has a huge role to play in people's lives. I know California has been a leader. As you know, I think at one point was the 5th largest economy in the world on its own. I don't know if that stat is still true, but California has created its own standards with regard to zero emission vehicle deployment in its state, and it's such a big economy that such a big automobile market, and other states have joined in. That over the last decade has had an enormous impact in moving the industry towards greater manufacturing scale for electric vehicles. It's also created a mechanism to support early movers in that space and help them to bring costs down more quickly. So when states, I think, set a goal, whether it's based on climate or air quality and all the health outcomes that are tied to things like SOx and NOx and particulate matter that come out of internal combustion engines, tailpipes. I think it's good public policy, and it does provide a signal to automakers and dealers and everybody across the supply chain that this is an accelerating movement in this direction. So there are policies like advanced clean cars, which is the California policy that other states have adopted. There's also advanced clean trucks, which is focused around medium and heavy duty vehicles. Increasingly an important part of emissions and particulate matter, has a disproportionate effect on disadvantaged communities of color, and so exponential benefits of electrifying that sector. And then advanced clean fleets is a policy beyond ACT that targets public and large private fleets, things like ports and drayage vehicles. And so this is sort of the next frontier that a lot of folks are looking at. And what I'm really excited is when we start to see those vehicles manufactured and deployed at the type of scale on a percentage basis that we see in the light duty sector now.
So you just touched upon fleet. Like, I feel like that's one of the fastest ways toward mass adoption, right? So whether it's the United States Postal Service converting trucks to EV, whether it's Rivian and Amazon teaming up, private sector engagement, even taxi fleets now converting EV, it just kind of creates, to your point, more awareness from the consumer, more of an opportunity to actually engage with EVs. Maybe you're taking an Uber and it's an EV, and then that's your first interaction, right? So how are you thinking about that fleet adoption as part of it? And that kind of segues, I think, to rural America and kind of parts that are not coastal, right? Like, how do you kind of, whether it's a manufacturing plant in middle of America, and how that maybe helps kind of create more buy-in more broadly?
Yeah, well, I think in the Postal Service, things like school buses, that's something that I think touches everybody's life, rural, urban. The health impacts on children of diesel trucks and diesel buses are very well known, and for the first time, we're seeing the potential to remove or significantly reduce those health impacts. And I think that's extremely compelling for people across the political spectrum, the rural or urban spectrum. So that groups like WRI, and I know that the administration's had a big focus on that, but you also you see utilities in red and blue states across the country focused on how can we create new opportunities. Fleets allow all those stakeholders to kind of unlock further benefits. When it comes to how these vehicles fit into the grid, a potential future where they may also be used as grid resources, or at the very least as emergency backup resources. When you have a large concentration of medium or heavy duty vehicles that are electrified, it unlocks a lot more potential in that regard. And also, they're fairly predictable in terms of the way they're used, when they're charging, when they're in use, and so it's a really exciting space. I think where you start to see policy and the market really start to accelerate how they're innovating is when you start to see large volumes of vehicles on the road being deployed. That's, I know, what we saw in the light duty space.
So I feel like one of the challenges there is a bit of supply and demand, right? I mean, I feel like demand's surging. I'm still on my wait list for Rivian, if you're watching Rivian. And people are excited to get it, but then it's taking time to get it. I know Glenn and I had to drive to Norfolk to get his EV charge, right? So how do we kind of accelerate the supply to meet the demand that's there?
That's what everybody's working on right now. I mean,
I'm just having coffee, but
yeah,
you're working on it.
Well, you told me that you're working on some things with regards to it starts with site selection, and how can you bring everything you need from power supply to water. If you're building a battery manufacturing plant, you need power and water and everything. It narrows down the list pretty quickly on where you can put a plant like that. But there's domestic and mineral supply is likely going to reach a point in the next decade or so where we're really, really highly incentivized to create new capacity here in the United States or among our allied countries, due to the way the bill's written. Manufacturing capacity, it doesn't spring up overnight. There is a lot of investment that will create new jobs over the next 2 to 3 years that in turn will create a lot more volume production of electric vehicles. Rivian's a good example of a company that is in the process of investing in a building a new factory in Georgia that is going to dramatically increase their volume of production. I drive a Rivian. I love it. It's a fantastic car and can fit all 3 of my kids, and
Good to know now.
all still in car seats or booster seats, which is harder than it looks.
Well, you have the pickup truck. You just dump them in the back, right?
Yeah, that was when we were kids, I think. Yeah, I think it's probably for the best. That anymore.
Well, one of the kind of things that is surprising me is the level of interest of foreign companies coming to the United States. So I know Arrival is a member of ZETA, but you look at Arrival, Einride, Innobat, battery companies. It's not just that they're looking to sell here, they're looking to plant the flag and build in America, which I think is catching a lot of people off guard, this real resurgence in American manufacturing. How important is that? Are you going to go global? What is your kind of message to other innovators around the world that could be adding to supply chain capacity in the United States to meet these goals? I
think it's really important. I mean, the U.S. manufacturing sector is incredible, and the what we've seen in the EV space is a lot of investment from companies that are primarily based overseas but have a U.S. subsidiary or a U.S. presence, whether it's LG or Panasonic in the battery space, that are bringing massive investment to states that are primarily known for auto manufacturing. States like Ohio, Tennessee, and Georgia, Kentucky, Indiana, where there is a huge manufacturing base that is eager to work on whatever the sort of source of future scale is, and in this case it's batteries and EV assembly. So there are many good examples of that, of folks. I mean, Tesla is itself a good example in California of having moved into a vacant factory that formerly was a joint venture between Toyota and GM that closed and sat empty for a few years, and then Tesla moved in. Many of the same people that worked there before came in and started building EVs instead of gas cars. And so there are a lot of examples like that. Rivian's in a former Mitsubishi plant in Illinois, and then you've got examples like LG in Tennessee building a new facility sort of adjacent to the existing Spring Hill GM plant there. So it's, I think, a really great sign that the U.S. is, China has led in terms of the number of EVs sold over the last 10 years. It's a massive country. It's had a lot of government support for that industry, but the U.S. I think is really reclaiming a leadership role in automobile manufacturing, EV manufacturing specifically, and it's one of the many benefits of the policymaking over the last 2 years is improving the United States' competitive position in the world with regard to advanced manufacturing.
Right. Well, look, to close it out, we always love to ask about a call to action. You obviously have huge members, but regular folks out there, I mean, is the call to action to buy an EV, call your member of Congress, push your school board for EV buses for the kids? Like, what's kind of a takeaway that regular Americans at home watching can kind of do to help support this acceleration?
I think considering buying an EV is a good call to action. There are so many options out there now. I went to rent a car from Hertz the other day, and I think it gave me 5 different electric options, which is amazing compared to 5-6 years ago. So there's so many different opportunities now to go out and take a test drive of an electric vehicle. The social proof effect of people's friends and neighbors and coworkers having some experience with EVs is really, really important. The U.S. just passed 6% in terms of EV sales as a percentage of total vehicle sales, and that's fully electric vehicles. So that has been shown to be a meaningful threshold. Bloomberg did a study of 18 different countries last year that showed 5% is a very meaningful threshold, after which, tipping point, exactly. And so there are so many different opportunities to experience an electric vehicle. I would just encourage people to seek that out and experience it for themselves. It's not just a step you can take to reduce your carbon footprint. It also, can have a meaningful impact on your total cost of ownership for a vehicle. And also it's a part of, a really important United States industrial policy revolution that I think is going to set the stage for success over the last several decades.
Albert Gore III. Appreciate your comment.